With us as we link up with the Advocate and NOLA.com's football insider for LSU. As always, we appreciate his time on this Tuesday morning. With the hat. All right, bold play.
Yeah.
Wilson, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm not necessarily feeling 100%, so that's why you got the hat this morning.
The flu game.
So hopefully not, but yeah, something ain't quite right.
Wilson, I appreciate it.
It's my hair.
I think I know what that means, so I've been there. I appreciate your time this morning. All right, first off, Senior Bowl week. This is a week where a lot of business gets done around both college and pro football. LSU's got a couple of representatives there in Charles Turner and Jordan Jefferson. What do you expect from them this week?
Yeah, they're going to have a good chance to get themselves out in front of NFL scouts. And these are both players who, have a really good shot at maybe cementing their draft stock, getting in front of people and showing what they can do. I mean, Charles in particular, there's always been those questions about his size. And he, I think, answered those in a really good way over the last 2 years as a starter. But this is going to be another shot for him to be able to show what he can do against some other competition. And if NFL teams, want to take a flyer on him at some point. Same thing kind of with Jordan Jefferson in a way. I mean, he wasn't a full-time starter, didn't really start until the end of the year, but he's got a lot of tape out there. And this is another good chance for him to kind of try to get himself on NFL radars and get himself drafted. And outside of all of that, there's lots of, there's so many NFL people down there that there's lots of conversations happening and that kind of thing. And so both of these two have a good chance at the start of the draft process to try to boost their stock.
Wilson, I was talking about Austin Thomas joining the staff. That was a news dump on Friday afternoon that hit the airwaves. I believe you had it with him joining the staff and leaving Ole Miss. What does he bring?
Well, he's someone who has obviously been a top personnel, like sort of executive type in college football over the last 8 years or so. I mean, was at LSU from 2013 to 17, so I guess about a decade here. Where he was the first one in the Southeastern Conference with the GM title, as I think a lot of people know, and it's bounced around a good bit, but just keeps coming back to LSU. It's a place that he and his family like. And now here for the third time, he left briefly during his first stint, but then came back after 3 months from USC. And so it's going to be fascinating to see exactly what it is that he's doing, because it sounds like he's going to have his hands in sort of a lot of different things, whether it's personnel, roster management is kind of what he's done as a GM in the past, but he did even more than that at Ole Miss as the chief of staff, helping out with, as I understand it, with NIL and non-conference scheduling and a lot of different sort of things. And, LSU has some people already in place to do some of that kind of stuff, like non-conference scheduling is sort of a Verge Osbury task. But, he's now, his technical title is Senior Associate AD of Football Administration. And it's going to be really interesting to kind of see just how he and Brian Kelly and Scott Woodward are all kind of working together and what that dynamic is like, because Austin's certainly going to have sort of, as LSU's personnel department gets shaken up with Will Redmond leaving for Auburn last week, Austin has definitely got, some responsibilities in that, but he might be doing a little bit more than just like replacing Will one-to-one. I don't think it's quite like that. And so but obviously it's somebody who Scott Woodward really trusts, and LSU got him back over from Ole Miss, certainly drawing, as everybody knows, the ire of Lane Kiffin.
Yes. Nothing better than improving your staff first and foremost when you make an addition, but then weakening another staff is kind of like cherry on top. And that's one thing that LSU feels like they did here, especially if you're watching Kiffin in the way that he handled social media. You mentioned the title, Wilson, Senior Associate Athletic Director for Football Administration. It feels like that there may be a shakeup within the time. I mean, we know Beth is up at the top of LSU football. Obviously, Brian Kelly's up there. But it feels like the administration is a little bit more involved in this go-around, whether it's the coaching hires or even this title on Thomas, right? Am I looking too much into that?
No, I don't think necessarily you are. As I understand it, some of this is related to his buyout at Ole Miss and sort of having to work around that in some ways. And so it's a little bit ambiguous. That's part of the reason it's a little bit ambiguous. But yeah, I mean, Austin's going to be kind of at near the top in some capacity of this, kind of power structure. If you look at like an organizational chart, I'm really interested to see where Brian Kelly says Austin Thomas fits into that and where we sort of learn Austin Thomas fits into that. Because like you said, it's sort of Brian Kelly and then Beth Rexis is chief of staff. That's obviously the title that Austin had at Ole Miss, and it won't be the one he has here. And so is he kind of working with her? She's someone who's been with Brian Kelly for, I think, about 17 years. And, so that it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how all that plays out and what everybody's jobs is. Because when Brian Kelly got here, Austin Thomas was someone who he didn't retain, who a lot of people expected to be retained regardless of the coach. And Austin was let go anyway, told he wasn't going to be coming back to LSU the next season. And part of that, Brian Kelly, what he said as he was coming in was that organizationally, he saw sort of a structure and sort of that organizational chart that didn't make a whole lot of sense to him, with sort of people reporting to different folks, and he wanted to try to streamline it sort of through Beth Rex, is what he told me. Gosh, this was May 2022. And so, how does Austin fit into that is going to be fascinating.
Coaches on the road, recruiting. You made all the hires over the last month. Now these guys are dispersed to the road. They had a successful junior day, seemingly with a commitment from in-state. But what's the effect of recruiting now with these new hires?
Well, you hinted at the main one that we've seen is, the junior day went great from all accounts for LSU, and obviously coming out of that with Jabari Antoine committing over the weekend was huge. I mean, that's the kind of cornerback recruit that LSU wasn't getting the last 2 years. It wasn't also Louisiana wasn't producing necessarily the top 50 corner like Antoine is, borderline top 50. I guess he's like number 53 in the 24/7 composite rankings. You looked at like Jacoby Matthews and like Wardell Mack were probably the two other highest ranked guys in the last two classes. Obviously, Matthews more of a safety, but still, these defensive backs that LSU wasn't getting, these 5-star guys, these top 50 guys. And, Antoine told ESPN that Corey Raymond coming back was a big piece of that. So you're already starting to see what this staff's effect is going to be on recruiting. And obviously they got to maintain momentum and keep all that up. But that is a great signal that LSU with this staff is going to be able to get the kind of players at these positions of need that they maybe didn't have the last couple of years.
Wilson, I expect this April portal to be big for LSU, right? I mean, do you get a sense that they are preparing for that portal? And if so, how do you get ready for that time?
Everybody's preparing for that portal window. It sounds like it's going to be a little bit busier in the spring than it has been at any point. It always, the last few years that we've had the transfer portal open, it's hard to exactly predict what's going to happen because it's so new. But with Nick Saban leaving Alabama kind of right after the first portal window closed, and the effects of that we've sort of seen, the ripple effects of that are probably going to continue into this second portal window with with Alabama then being able to try to kind of size people up and reload its roster. And I think, there's a lot of sort of interest in the coaching ranks, and maybe even some fear. Some other places, Alabama with its pedigree is going to be able to kind of scoop up some people in the transfer portal here in this second window. And it's not just that. There's so many other schools that are looking for guys to come onto their rosters because it's just a constant year-round thing, and you prepare for it by constantly scouting guys who are on other teams and being ready when they hit the portal to make those phone calls. And, it seems like LSU is probably going to try to get a defensive tackle. They obviously offered I think it was maybe last week or in the last couple of weeks, Jalil Muhammad is a junior college guy. That's not quite the same thing as a transfer portal, but certainly speaks to, as we all know, their interest in adding a defensive tackle. And I think what other positions they're going to add to if any would maybe be corner as well. But it's going to have to be someone they like because they've got the good problem now on the scholarship limit, which is they're a little bit over the 85. And so there's going to actually have to be some attrition after this spring to get underneath that, which is not something else you had to deal with the last 2 years.
Wilson, since the last time we talked, LSU has added another coach to the staff in Slade Nagel, Louisiana native who's got a ton of Louisiana ties. What do you make of the addition?
Well, first of all, somebody who now everybody on this staff has coached in Louisiana before, has Louisiana ties, and it's every assistant on the staff is like that. It's really interesting that is something that LSU clearly prioritized because they want to be able to recruit this state and sort of lock it down. And sort of we saw in the last class really recruit a little bit more regionally. Maybe that's a strategic thing. Maybe it was a byproduct of what was available in this last class as well, because obviously in the next one LSU is going up to Michigan to get Bryce Underwood. So there's of course exceptions, but LSU I think wants to dominate Louisiana, and it's getting guys who are really experienced around here. And Nagel is another one of them, and he's somebody who was at Tulane for a long time. And he's also somebody with some play calling experience. Joe Sloan is going to be a play caller for just the second time in his career. Only did that for a couple seasons at Louisiana Tech. And not saying that, Slade Nagel is going to come in there and, try to wrestle with play calling duties or anything like that. But somebody else with another voice in the room who has experience doing that is going to probably be beneficial.
Did you get anything on these new coaches? I mean, it obviously was a prerequisite to have Louisiana ties, right? I mean, it seems like everyone who's been brought aboard now checks a box of some point being tied to the state.
It had to have been. I mean, gosh, we can run down the list, and it would probably take a few minutes. I mean, with Blake Baker, obviously he was played at Tulane and then coached at LSU and Louisiana Tech, and they bring in Jake Olson to coach safeties. This is his first time as an on-field coach, but he's been in Louisiana at Northwestern State and ULM and Nichols all before this, and at LSU in 2021. So even though he's kind of getting his first shot as an on-field coach, he's been around here, and he's somebody who Blake Baker really trusts as well. And then, of course, like we've already mentioned, Nagel, Bo Davis, of course, played at LSU, never was a defensive line coach at LSU, but, had certainly been on staff here before still. And you look at the offensive side, I think that was part of maybe the calculus for promoting internally with Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, is Sloan has got, that nickname, the mayor, around here. And he's somebody who's got a lot of deep ties, especially in recruiting around Louisiana. He's built those up for a long time. That was something that Brian Kelly in his statements after those hires were made official mentioned for both Nagel. Let's see. Yeah, I think it was all for Nagel, Cortez, and Joe, that he mentioned the words recruiting and player development with all three of them. And part of that is because, they've been able to recruit Louisiana, and they've got ties here to try to be able to do that.
Wilson, good stuff, man. Get healthy and appreciate the information as always. You can follow our boy on social media at WHAlexander_. Thank you.